The scream shattered the stillness of the mountainside monastery. It wasn't the scream of pain, but the scream of memory breaking loose. An old man, wrapped in saffron robes, collapsed just outside the meditation hall, clutching a letter he had never opened in 60 years. The novice monks rushed to him, but he waved them off. "Let me lie," he whispered, voice thin like parchment. I can still hear her voice. Tears streamed down his cheeks as the letter trembled in his hand. It was brittle, yellowed with time, still sealed. The wax bore the crest of a family he once ran from. Around him, the air was thick with incense and regret. A younger monk asked, "Master, are you in pain?" The old man replied, "No, child. I'm remembering who I was before I became who I am." His hands shook, not with age, but with the weight of truths long buried. That was the moment it all began. A truth denied, a past avoided, a final confession begging to be made before time ran out. They had never heard him speak of the past. Not once. Not in all their years under his teaching. The master's silence was legendary, so when he muttered, "I never answered her," it sent a chill through the air heavier than the wind itself. The youngest monk, barely 16, sat beside him. "Who, master?" The old man blinked. "My daughter," he said, voice dry like sand. "I never read her last letter." The boy stiffened. "A daughter?" The monk who taught that all attachments were chains had left someone behind? "I thought if I opened it, I'd go back. And if I went back, I'd never be able to return here." His words didn't sound like regret. They sounded like an unraveling. His hand rose shakily toward the sealed letter. "She died thinking I didn't care," he said. The monastery walls suddenly felt too tight, like they too were holding their breath. He hadn't spoken her name in over 60 years. Not even once in prayer. Yet tonight, under a blanket of stars, her name was breaking him. "Annika," he whispered, almost inaudibly. "She was 7 when I left. Told her I'd return by winter. I never did." His voice was not that of a monk, it was of a father confessing to ghosts. "I was afraid of what I had become. Afraid she would see through the cloth." The young monk didn't interrupt. He couldn't. The pain in the elder's voice froze even the night wind. "She wrote me every year until she stopped. That was the year she died." His hands trembled more violently now. "I thought I could find peace in silence, but silence just gave my guilt more room to scream." He looked at the boy. "Tell me, child, if I break now, do I break free?" Years of silence had become his second skin, but tonight it split. "I left because I was ashamed," he said. "I couldn't be father in failure." The novice monk remained still, barely breathing. The master stared into the darkness, eyes no longer seeing the mountains, but the memory of a little girl waiting at a gate. She waited every day, every season, until she stopped. His voice cracked. "I thought I was saving her from my brokenness, but I was just saving myself from shame." The words came slowly now, heavy like stones being laid at his own grave. "And now I realize, regret doesn't kill you in one blow. It eats you, memory by memory, until nothing remains but silence." A wind rushed through the courtyard, but it couldn't carry away what had finally been spoken. The novice finally spoke. "Do you want to open it now?" The old monk hesitated, fingertips brushing the seal. "I'm afraid it's too late," he said. The boy looked at him, not with pity, but defiance. "Then let her words be free, even if you never were." The elder's hand trembled. Then, slowly, he broke the wax. The crack of the seal sounded louder than thunder in that sacred silence. He unfolded the letter with reverence, like unwrapping a relic. His eyes scanned the lines, lips moving, but no sound coming out. A smile, small and broken, tugged at his mouth. "She said she forgave me," he finally breathed. "Long before I could forgive myself." He wept, not like a monk, but like a father hearing his child's voice one last time. The morning after was quiet, not with peace, but with the silence that follows a storm. The elder monk sat by the stone pond, the opened letter resting beside him like an ancient wound. He had not spoken since the night before, but something had changed. His back was no longer bent by burden, only age. The novice approached with fresh tea. The elder spoke before the boy could kneel. "When I came here, I thought if I shed my name, I could shed my guilt." He looked at the sky. "But guilt lives in silence. It thrives in what you refuse to say." The boy remained still, letting the truth breathe. "Her forgiveness," the old monk whispered, "was more generous than I ever deserved." Then, with a shaky hand, he placed the letter in the firebowl. "Peace," he said, "is not forgetting. It is remembering without letting it break you." The boy sat down beside the elder, eyes watching the rising sun ripple across the pond's surface. "Master," he asked softly, "do you wish you had stayed?" The old monk closed his eyes. "I wish I had been brave enough to stay." A breeze caught the edge of the letter before it was gently caught and placed back. "I thought I had to choose between peace and presence," he said. "I now know they could have coexisted if I had let them." The boy said nothing. The monk added, "The shame wasn't in leaving. It was in never returning." The boy finally dared to ask, "And now?" The elder looked toward the mountains, the horizon stretching like a quiet promise. "Now, I stay. Fully. Not as a monk, but as a man who remembers." He smiled faintly, the kind that breaks and heals at once. Later that day, the elder invited the novice into the small library, an act unheard of. "I want you to see the things I never shared," he said. Dust motes danced in sunlight that pierced the small window. Scrolls, journals, and sealed boxes filled the cramped space. He handed the boy a bundle of letters, unopened, all from his daughter. "I was afraid of what they'd say," he whispered, "but even more afraid of what they'd make me feel." The boy opened one. It was a child's scrawl. "Dear Papa, I saw a cloud shaped like you today." The monk shut his eyes. "Even after I left, she still saw me in the sky." He chuckled through tears. "She saw love where I only saw failure." The boy folded the letter gently, as if handling a sacred relic. The room pulsed with unspoken grace. The old monk lit a small lantern as dusk approached. "Regret teaches slowly," he said. "Sometimes it waits a lifetime to speak." He sat on the stone steps overlooking the valley, the novice by his side. "When I first arrived here, I buried my past beneath silence and rituals. But the silence grew louder than any chant." The boy looked at him, eyes filled with a sorrow that didn't belong to him, but he carried it anyway. "Why now?" the boy asked. The elder's eyes glistened. "Because before I leave this world, I want someone to know the truth." He looked at the boy. "Not so you can fix it, but so you'll never repeat it." The valley stretched before them, bathed in golden twilight, as two generations sat with the weight of one man's life between them. That night, the old monk placed the letters back into their box, but this time, not to hide them. "These are hers," he said, tying the box with cloth. "They belong to memory now, not shame." He handed the box to the boy. "Someday when someone asks you why people break, tell them it's not because they are weak. It's because they carry things too heavy to speak aloud." The boy looked down at the box, then up at the man who had once been silent. "Will you ever forgive yourself?" The old monk exhaled slowly. "Some forgiveness comes from others. The rest we must give ourselves each morning, again and again." A bell rang in the distance. Time, always moving. The monk whispered, "But tonight, I sleep lighter than I have in decades." And he smiled, not wide but true. The next morning, the novice returned with questions burning behind his silence. "Oh, Master, did you ever try to return to her?" The old monk didn't look away from the garden he was tending. "I stood at the gate once. She was 10. I watched her from a distance, braiding flowers into her hair." His hands paused, dirt falling through his fingers. "I couldn't walk in. I told myself it was for her safety, but it was my fear." The boy's voice broke. She waited for you. She believed in you. The monk nodded slowly. And I punished her belief by vanishing. Because I didn't know how to show up flawed. He stared at the earth. I thought redemption required perfection. I didn't know that broken things can still belong. The boy blinked back tears. She never stopped making flower chains. Maybe she never stopped waiting. The silence turned sharp again, no longer sacred, but suffocating. Later, inside the monk's chamber, the boy found an old portrait tucked beneath a floor mat. A woman and a girl, both smiling, both gone. "Why did you keep this hidden?" he asked. The old monk took the photo, eyes tracing every line of their faces. "Because it was proof I once belonged somewhere, and I feared it would tempt me to go back." His fingers trembled on the photo's edge. "This is the face of the man I was, a man who chose the mountain over his daughter. I buried him long ago." The boy shook his head. "You didn't bury him, you just stopped speaking his name." The monk closed his eyes, pressing the photo to his heart. "Then, let today be the funeral." He breathed deeply. "Not for the man I was, but for the silence I became." The wind outside echoed like a sigh from the past. Word of the elder's breakdown had begun to ripple through the monastery. Some whispered of failing wisdom, others of divine reckoning. The elder knew. He felt their glances during morning chants, their cautious steps near him. "Do you regret showing them?" the novice asked. The monk answered without hesitation. "No. A truth buried too long becomes a lie." He rose from his mat. "Let them know. Let them see that even monks can bleed beneath the robes." The boy hesitated. "But won't they question your teachings now?" The old monk turned, steady and calm. "Then let them. If truth weakens the lesson, it was never a lesson worth teaching." His voice held steel now. "Let this place remember me not for silence, but for breaking it." The bells rang, but this time, they didn't call for prayer. They sounded like alarm. A senior monk approached him near the cliff's edge that afternoon. "You were our pillar of silence," he said coldly. "Why now?" The elder looked out toward the distant peaks. "Because silence never healed me, it only hid me." The other monk's face hardened. "What you say unsettles the younger ones. They look up to you." The elder turned slowly. "Then, they should see what happens when a man hides too long." His voice rose, firmer. "Peace is not absence of noise. It is presence with truth." The two stood in a standoff, tradition against confession. "You risk unraveling everything we've built," the senior hissed. The elder answered, "If it unravels from truth, it was stitched in denial." Wind howled past them, lifting their robes in ghostly motion. The mountain did not choose sides, but it listened. That night, he returned to the meditation hall alone. No chants, no incense, just the echo of his footsteps and 1,000 silent prayers. He knelt in the center, facing no altar, only the darkness. "Annika," he whispered. "I broke the silence, not because I'm brave, but because I'm finally tired of hiding." His breath caught. "You deserved a father who stayed. I wasn't him. But maybe I can still become someone she'd forgive." The air around him felt thick with memory. The letter. Dandy. The photo. Her voice imagined but clear. "Papa, I still braid flowers." He broke then, not into sobs but into stillness. The kind that only comes when pain has finally been honored. He stayed kneeling until morning light spilled through the windows, illuminating not a monk, but a man undone and reborn. 3 days later, a letter arrived at the monastery gate, addressed not to the elder monk, but to the novice. The boy brought it to the elder, confused. "It's from a woman named Mira," he said. The elder froze. That name hadn't been spoken since before Annika died. He opened it with trembling hands. Mira was Annika's daughter, his granddaughter. The word sliced deeper than any blade. "I found your name in my mother's journals. She forgave you. But she never stopped waiting." Monk's breath caught. "She asked me, before she died, To find you. Not for closure, for connection. The letter was an open door he never imagined would exist. A chance, not to erase the past, but to meet the future it left behind. His fingers clenched the paper. A granddaughter. A living thread to the daughter he lost. The silence wasn't done speaking yet. He didn't speak for hours after reading the letter. That night, the novice found him sitting at the base of the Bodhi tree, the letter clutched tightly. "She looks like her," he finally said. Same curve of the smile. Same stubborn tilt to her words. He laughed bitterly. "I abandoned a daughter and gained a granddaughter I never earned." The novice knelt beside him. "But maybe that's the gift. She came anyway." The old monk nodded slowly. "I spent a lifetime punishing myself, thinking suffering would repay what I stole, but all it did was rob me twice." He leaned back against the tree. "I thought karma was punishment. I didn't know it could also be mercy." A breeze rustled the branches above them, as if the tree itself whispered forgiveness into the night. At dawn, the elder monk took the novice aside. "There's something else," he whispered. From beneath his robe, he drew a torn piece of parchment, the only part of a letter he ever wrote but never sent. "I wrote to Anika once. I begged for forgiveness but never mailed it." The novice took the page, eyes scanning fading ink. "I fear you'll see the monster I believe I've become." The monk's voice cracked. "That fear kept me frozen. I didn't know then. Children don't need perfection. They need presence." His voice fell to a whisper. "I wasn't there to see her grow, but maybe now I can be there for the one she left behind." The novice gently folded the parchment. "Then write again, master. This time, send it." And for the first time, the elder nodded without hesitation. That evening, the elder monk sat before blank parchment. But his hands didn't tremble this time. Each word came not from guilt, but from love, long delayed. "Mira, I do not ask for forgiveness. I only hope to offer truth. Your mother was my light, even when I walked in shadow." He paused often, not to search, but to feel. When he finished, he sealed the letter and placed it before the statue of Avalokiteshvara. "She is not an offering," he said. "She is a beginning." The novice watched as the old monk bowed, not out of ritual, but reverence. "You're not the man who ran anymore," the boy whispered. The monk smiled softly. "No, I'm the one who stopped." In that moment, peace did not look like silence. It looked like honesty. The following morning, the novice ran to the gate as a lone rider approached from the valley road. A woman dismounted, holding a letter in her hand, the same seal the elder had broken days ago. The boy's voice trembled. "Are you Mira?" She nodded, eyes wide with cautious hope. From behind, the old monk emerged, robes flowing like memories catching wind. Their eyes met across years of silence. Mira stepped forward, tears brimming. "I thought I'd feel anger," she whispered, "but I only feel pulled toward you." The monk's eyes shimmered. "I was lost, but I remember her, through you." Mira slowly extended her hand. He took it, not as a monk, not as a stranger, but as a man meeting his granddaughter for the first time. No words could contain the echo of that moment. They sat beneath the ancient tree, grandfather and granddaughter, strangers bound by blood and silence. Mira studied him like someone deciphering a story she'd only ever heard in fragments. "She spoke of you often," she said softly, "but not with anger, with hate." The monk closed his eyes, voice barely rising. "I imagined her growing bitter. I never imagined her growing kind." Mira touched the earth between them. "She wondered if you ever thought of her." The old monk's voice cracked. "Every day, every sunrise, every bell I rang." He turned toward her. "I was a coward. I chose the mountain over the mirror." Mira nodded slowly. "Then maybe now you're brave enough to look." The monk looked into her eyes, not to be judged, but to be seen. And for the first time, he didn't look away. Inside his quarters, He handed Mira a small wooden box, the one filled with Anika's unopened letters. "These belong to you now," he said. Mira hesitated. "She wrote these, knowing you may never read them." He nodded slowly. "She wrote because she believed, and I left them sealed because I was afraid her belief would shatter me." Mira opened one letter gently. Her mother's handwriting danced across the page, still vibrant. She read aloud, voice trembling. "Dear Papa, I hope the mountain teaches you to smile again." The monk closed his eyes, tears rising. "She was always the teacher," he whispered. Mira looked at him. "And now it's your turn to be the student." The box sat between them, no longer a symbol of abandonment, but of reunion. That night, the monk led Mira to the meditation hall. He didn't sit at the altar. Instead, he unrolled a blank scroll in the center of the floor. "Write what you feel," he said. Mira hesitated. "What if I don't know yet?" The monk smiled. "Then write that." She began, hesitant strokes on ancient parchment. Each word, a bridge. He watched in silence, reverence in his eyes. When she finished, she asked, "What will you do with it?" He answered, "Keep it, to remember this moment, the one where we chose presence over pain." She smiled, eyes glistening. "I never thought I'd find you, and I never thought you'd be real." The monk took her hand. "Neither did I, but truth waits, even if it takes a lifetime." Outside, the stars seemed closer than ever before. At sunrise, the elder monk stood before the entire monastery. His voice, once reserved for chants, now spoke truth. "I ran from my past and wore silence as virtue, but it was fear." The monk stood still, unsure, shaken. "We teach detachment, but detachment without honesty is denial." He looked toward Mira, who stood quietly at the edge of the hall. "Peace isn't the absence of pain. It is the presence of truth, fully felt." One of the senior monks stepped forward. "And what do we do with your confession?" The elder replied, "Learn from it, or reject it. But let it be known, I do not fear being seen anymore." Mira stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. He didn't flinch. He stood taller. He was no longer hiding. That evening, the novice sat beside the elder one last time beneath the starlit sky. "Master," he asked, "was this all worth it?" The monk looked toward Mira, now sitting near the edge of the courtyard, her face turned toward the stars. "Every tear, every silence, every letter I never read, it led here." He paused. "Regret doesn't vanish, but it no longer owns me." The novice nodded slowly. "Will you leave with her?" The monk smiled. "No, but I will write, and I will wait." The boy asked, "For what?" The monk answered, "For the day she returns, not to forgive, but simply to sit beside me again." As the wind stirred the trees, the stars above shimmered like they too were finally at peace. Days passed with a new stillness. Not the quiet that hides, but the kind that listens. Mira remained at the monastery longer than she planned. Each morning, she walked the same path her mother once might have imagined, by the stone pond beneath the prayer flag. The old monk watched her from a distance, never asking for more than what she gave freely. One morning, she approached him. "You're different," she said. He nodded. "I stopped waiting to be forgiven. I started living like I already was." She studied his face. She'd be proud. He looked away, voice tender. "Then I've done enough." It wasn't triumph in his voice. It was peace. Earned. Carved. Weighed. Scarred and softened by truth. The novice watched from afar, knowing this was no longer just a story of regret, but of arrival. In the novice quarters, the young monk held the old letter from Anika, tracing the faded ink with reverence. He had asked the elder monk if he could keep one. "Why?" the elder asked. The boy replied, "To remember that truth takes time, and love survives silence." The old monk had smiled, nodding. "Then, it belongs to you now." That night, the novice placed the letter inside his prayer book. not to worship it, but to carry the weight of a life spoken. He whispered before sleep, I will not become a silence. Outside, the wind rustled like pages turning, like ghosts finally settling. What the monk had buried, the boy now bore, not as burden, but as warning. He would be a different kind of teacher, one who remembered. Before she left, Mira visited the elder one final time. Will you come down from the mountain someday? She asked. He looked at her gently. I may never leave this place, but I will never again be absent. She handed him a small framed photo, her and her mother, taken years ago. Then keep us here, she said, tapping his heart. Not in memory, in presence. He placed the photo beside the altar. Not hidden, not sacred, just there. Next time, she said, you'll meet my son. He blinked. I'm a great-grandfather. Mira laughed softly. Yes, and he already has your quiet stare. The monk chuckled, a sound full of sunlight. She kissed his forehead, and in that kiss lived every word Anika never got to say. After Mira departed, the elder monk returned to the cliff's edge where he once avoided truth. This time, he stood tall. He unwrapped a bundle, the last letter from Anika, now reread and worn soft. He whispered, you waited. And now, I walk toward you with no shadows behind me. He lit incense and bowed, not to erase, but to honor. Behind him, the novice waited. Master, he said, you once told me peace was remembering without breaking. The monk turned. Yes, but now I know. Peace is also sharing what once broke you. The valley below shimmered in morning mist. The world hadn't changed. But he had. And that was enough. The cliff no longer loomed as punishment. It opened like invitation. That evening, the old monk gathered the novices and told the story he had once buried. The girl he left, the silence he chose, the love that never died. No parables. Just truth. Some cried. Some sat in stunned silence. One asked, why now? He answered, because wisdom without honesty becomes another form of pride. The moon rose as he spoke, casting silver over their faces. I do not offer you a clean past, he said. But I offer you the courage to face yours. When he finished, the hall remained quiet. Not out of discomfort, but reverence. For the first time, the story wasn't about failure. It was about return. The monk sat among them, not above, not apart, just present. And that was the lesson. Seasons turned. Snow returned to the peaks. Mira's letters became a rhythm in the monk's days. He answered each one by hand, no longer hiding behind robes or rituals. His handwriting was slow, deliberate, like someone learning to speak again. One morning, he received a photograph. Mira, her husband, their son, his great-grandson, smiling in a sun-drenched field. He held it for a long time before placing it beside Anika's final letter. You, he whispered, are the thread she left me. The monastery had never seen him so alive. He smiled more. He taught differently, not from scrolls but from scars. The novices listened with wide eyes. We study sutras, he said once, but some truths must be lived, not read. And in their eyes he saw what he never allowed himself before, legacy not of silence, but of healing. One evening, as the bells echoed through the valley, the monk sat at the threshold of the temple, watching the stars emerge. The novice sat beside him in silence. I used to think peace was a place, the monk said, somewhere above pain, beyond memory. He shook his head softly. But peace is simply the truth accepted. The novice tilted his head. And is it enough? The old man nodded. More than enough. It frees the dead, and it lets the living begin again. A shooting star crossed the sky. The novice whispered, she forgave you long before you forgave yourself. The monk replied, and still, I had to say it aloud to believe it. His hand gently touched his heart. Some truths must be spoken, not to be heard, but to be released. The wind stirred, like a voice exhaling. Later that week, the elder monk led the novices to a small clearing he had once avoided for decades, the spot where he had first collapsed with the letter. He stood tall now, the earth no longer heavy beneath him. "This is where I broke," he said quietly. "But it is also where I began again." He knelt and planted a small sapling. "We bury the past not to forget, but to let something grow." The novices circled him. The boy who had first found him all those months ago placed his hand over the soil. "And what will this tree be called?" The monk smiled. "Anika." They bowed their heads. The past was not undone, but it was honored. And for the first time, the roots of grief fed something green. Time passed gently. The monk aged not in weakness, but in calm. Mira visited often. Her son would run through the monastery paths laughing, filling spaces once thick with silence. One evening, she found the monk watching the boy play. "He's fearless," she said. The monk nodded. "He never learned to be afraid of love." He turned to her. "You broke the chain, not me." Mira took his hand. "You handed me the truth. That's what set us free." He smiled. "Then let this place remember that silence is not peace, and shame is not devotion." They stood together, not as broken pieces, but as a lineage restored. In the laughter of a child, and the stillness of the mountain, a new story had begun. And it began not with silence, but with listening. The monk passed on a winter morning, quietly, without struggle. He left behind no possessions, just letters, seeds, and a story rewritten. The novices gathered in silence, Mira by their side. The old prayer mat was empty, but the space around it was full of memory, of presence, of peace. Mira placed one final letter beside him. It was addressed not to him, but to the child he once was. "You were never unworthy, you were just unseen." As snow began to fall, the bells rang, not in mourning, but in tribute. The novice who once asked, "Will you forgive yourself?" now whispered, "You did." And as the wind danced through the trees, carrying the snow skyward, one final truth settled softly into the earth. Some wounds stay quiet until they raise children of their own.